Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Les damos la bienvenida al webinario Protección Social Adaptativa.
Social protection, closing gaps, and building resilience. This conversation will mainly take place in Spanish.
In English, you can select the English in the interpretation button in your Zoom toolbar. We have a simultaneous translation. Se quiser ouvir o português, selecione o português no botão de interpretação em seu Zoom. Mi nombre es Luis Tejerina. Soy un especialista.
My name is Luis Tejerina, and I work for the Social Protection and Labor Markets Division at the IDB, and I will be moderating this webinar. To begin, I would like to give the floor to Fernando Regalia, who's the manager of the social sector at the Inter-American Development Bank. Fernando, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Luis, and welcome to all of you. It is truly a pleasure to be with you today. And it is also a pleasure to welcome you to this Adaptive Social Protection, a webinar organized by the IDB to the launch of this report, Adaptive Social Protection, Closing Gaps and Building Resilience. For the IDB to invest in adaptive social protection means increasing the resilience of households in the context of crises that is increasingly more frequent and more complex. For example, Latin America and the Caribbean is the second region in the world that is more prone to extreme meteorological events. And just think about it, between 2000 and 2022, more than 1,300 events were recorded according to the International Disaster Database. And at the same time, that over 1 million people live in areas that combine high levels of poverty and high exposure to disaster. Into this, we add other shocks such as economic crisis or health emergencies. And these scenarios affect disproportionately the poor, vulnerable households by deepening inequalities. And it is within this context that adaptive social protection enables us to take advantage of already existing systems with money transfers, social records, payment mechanisms, in order to anticipate this, to be prepared, and to respond to different types of shocks. The evidence left by the pandemic was dramatic. The countries with more prepared social protection systems were able to use that as response platforms. They quickly identified the beneficiaries, they channeled assistance, and they deployed large-scale interventions. And thus, we were able to protect millions of people, supporting consumption, preserving human capital, and avoiding negative clashes. Therefore, the lesson is very clear. To invest in adaptive social protection not only enables us to protect living conditions in the short term, but it also prevents us from economic and social impacts that are much more severe and deeper in the future. In that regard, it is an option, cost-effective policy option. Estimates that we've obtained at the IDB show that every dollar investment made in adaptive social protection can generate between $1.4 and $2 in benefits to avoid human life losses and benefit in revenues. Therefore, we developed the maturity model of adaptive social protection. We presented this, we've used it in 13 countries in the region, and that model enables us to better understand the level of preparedness of social protection systems, adaptive social protection systems in the region, to identify gaps and to prioritize investments with hard data. The report and the platform that is being launched today are concrete tools that attempt to facilitate the learning process between countries and to support the decision-making based on evidence. I do not wish to bid farewell before addressing special recognition to Roselena, National Secretary of the Social Assistance, Rosalyn Cristina Rocha, Ministry of Social Development, and Augusto de los Santos, Director, Single Registry of Beneficiaries. These are regional leaders who are with us today, whose work is and has been essential in order to promote this agenda. I would also like to thank the French Agency of Development for their strategic support in the implementation of the maturity model, and to all my colleagues from the IDB who developed and carried out the report and the platform that is being launched today. today. So I invite you to take advantage of the space in order to ponder upon this and to continue moving forward with an agenda that is key in order to build resiliences and protect the most vulnerable in our region. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'll get back to Luis. Thank you, Ferdinando, for stressing the importance and the profitability of these investments. The French agency has been a key partner in this initiative, supporting both the development and implementation of the tool in the region, and therefore I'd like to give the floor to Audrey Nierengarten, Deputy Director of the Health and Social Protection Division of the French Development Agency. Please, Audrey, go ahead.
Hola, bonjour. Good morning to all. I'm pleased to join you for this webinar. Just a few words of introduction. First, to tell you where we come from as a French Development Agency. In France, social protection offers support at each stage of the life cycle, from cradle to grave. France's social protection system has been described as complex because it is complete. It is a big part of our public expenditures, but this has proven benefits in terms of reducing inequalities and supporting social progress and economic growth. This tradition has shaped AFD's commitment to supporting partners countries to strengthen their social protection systems. Indeed, as it's been already mentioned, we live in an era shaped by pandemic risks, conflict, climate change, and cost of living challenges. Many countries realize that strong and resilient social protection systems are key to sustain progress in face of these challenges and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, it matters because it can help create enabling conditions to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions while helping those most affected by the transition to greener economies. But it is also a critical tool to adapt to climate risks linked to climate change. In that regard, adaptive social protection means that social protection programs and systems, including safety nets, are actually flexible, resilient, and responsive to the shock induced by the environmental crisis. Our commitment at AFD to ASP, adaptive social protection, predates the COVID crisis, in particular in Africa. During the COVID crisis, we financed with other colleagues, other development banks, we financed large-scale operations through loans in countries such as India, Bangladesh, Mauritius, Brazil, Bolivia, but we also provided some support through grants. More recently, in Latin America, AFD signed a contingency loan in Peru with a policy matrix linking disaster risk management through civil protection to adaptive social protection. In Dominican Republic, we are currently preparing a project combining watershed management strategies and adaptive social protection to combat both climate and social vulnerabilities. We are convinced that for public development banks and for governments, as it's been just said by my colleague from IDB, adaptive social protection is a cost-effective investment. It indeed reduces economic losses of households. It supports macroeconomic stabilities and recovery through consumption. It helps reduce poverty and inequalities, improving also food security, household incomes, post-disaster or post-shock. Social protection programs which are adaptive also have high political and social returns. They strengthen government legitimacy and social cohesion by providing rapid and targeted support to affected population. Yet these cost-effective investments to preserve the well-being of countries and individuals actually need to be well prepared. That's the aim of our joint investment, and that we will discuss today. Our support with IDB to support the development of the maturity model was conceived as a contribution to strengthening the institutional capacity of countries in the region. It is essential that the results obtained in the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Barbados, Guatemala, and Suriname are disseminated at the regional level, and that the maturity model are applied in other countries. that would allow to show results, share lessons learned, and good practices more broadly across the region. We are pleased to have contributed to this initiative together with the IDB. It constitutes a regional public good that enables replicability and comparability across countries, and whose lessons learned can be useful also in other regions where AFD operates. Thank you very much for this opportunity of joint learning. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Audrey.
Thank you very much, Audrey. On our part, we greatly support the strategic support of the French agency in all this effort. Now I'd like to invite two of the participants and my colleagues, Alexandre Bagol, Senior Specialist in Social Protection, and Ginés Suarez, Senior Specialist in Disaster Management at the IDB, to present the main findings of the report. Please, Alex and Ginés, go ahead. Thank you very much, Luis. It is a great pleasure for us to share the main results of the implementation of the maturity model and a roadmap on adaptive social protection. It is a collective effort with a significant contribution by colleagues from the entire region and government counterparts that trusted us in order to move forward with the work agenda on adaptive social protection. In just a few minutes, I would like to show you the general approach of the model and the main results. We hope that this tool will be a valuable input for the dialogues to take place in your countries. The context is evident for those of us living in the region. Our region faces more frequent and intense shocks that go from economic and health crisis to natural disasters, devastating disasters. Let us think of the recent floods in Argentina, in Bahia Blanca, Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, or the devastating hit of Melissa, the hurricane in Jamaica. These shocks matter. It matters how we take care of them for social protection because their impacts are not distributed in a uniform way. As you can see on the map with the poverty rate, poor and vulnerable households are those the most widely affected, as Ferdinando was saying, with less resources in order to be prepared to face this, run the risk of falling into the poverty traps, expanding the gap between those who can adapt to this new reality and those who cannot. This is particularly concerning in a region that ranks second in the world in exposure to disasters. Only disasters related to the climate place 91 million poor people in areas of high risk in the region. It is within this context that the social protection systems can and must play a determined, a resolute role in this. Adaptive social protection implies using existing systems, as Ferdinando was also saying, in order to be prepared and respond to large-scale shocks. The systems have infrastructure and tools that can be used in order to focus on the most vulnerable. You can act before the disasters, which is always the most effective way. It is always better to prevent than to cure. Channeling actions of risk reduction and triggering anticipated money transfers before the disaster hits in order to promote evacuation and the protection of goods and assets. You can also act post-disaster, offsetting losses with timely transfers. However, for you to do this with success in these new roles, the social protection systems must be better prepared and adapted, and this is where the maturity model comes in. This is a concrete case that illustrates why it is so important to move forward with the adaptive social protection. To the left, you have the pictures of these floods in 2024 in Rio Grande do Sul, and the picture to the right shows a large number of institutions coordinating post-disaster. This is where the maturity model adds a value, because in a preventive way and before the disaster hits, it enables us to identify gaps and beef up protection, generate protocols, improve the use of information, operational continuity, so that the response will not be something that is organized at the time of the disaster, but something that is already designed based on the maturity model. And the question that we can ask ourselves is, are we prepared? Are we ready? Is the region prepared? And this is where the maturity model helps. This evaluation model measures how prepared these models are to respond to shocks and support resilience when dealing with new risk. It has 7 dimensions that altogether offer a complete vision of a social protection system that is adapted. Each dimension has indicators classified in 5 levels. Level 1, which is the one of lower maturity, to level 5, higher maturity. And then we transform this into a percentage unprecedented scale to facilitate transformation. The model helps to identify strengths and gaps, guide plans of action, and to promote the exchange of best practices among countries. Last but not least, the model contributes with a key value. It does imply direct work with the countries, which strengthens this interinstitutional coordination that we saw in the previous picture. Everybody sitting at the same table so that we can work together. The allocation of the results and the promotion of this adaptive social protection system. To date, we've used this in 13 countries. With the information collected, we've developed a regional report that analyzes the capacity of adaptive social protection systems in the region, and currently the app is in the process in Mexico and Uruguay.
This tool offers a comprehensive approach to response to a crisis. In order to do so, it analyzes 7 key dimensions: the context where the system operates, including elements such as financial inclusion, if there are digital payments, the level of social spending, and then governance and financing. What are the regulatory framework and institutional agreements, the resources that we have available before the shock? Third, coverage, infrastructure. Infrastructure and interoperability, which is key to coordinate all the different actors. 4, the capacity to manage and coordinate, because usually many stakeholders are involved. Then access points for citizens so that they can present their claims, and then also services to the different shocks. And finally, whether social protection is informed with data, for example, about climate, early warning systems to strengthen preparedness and response. And now my colleague Alex Bagol will share the main findings of the report. Thank you, Gines, for the presentation of the conceptual framework of the report. As you said, the score goes from 0 to 100. 0 is a hypothetical country with no progress in adaptive social protection, and 100 would represent a country that would meet the best practices in terms of adaptive social protection. When we apply the model to countries, we saw that on average the region has a 54% score. So the region has walked already half the way to get together. Chile and Brazil show the highest levels in terms of progress, but even them have pending challenges. On the right hand of the graph, there are countries that have greater opportunities and challenges. So, strengthening adaptive social systems, especially in a preemptive manner, is fundamental for risk management and building resiliency. What we have seen throughout the region is that the degree of maturity of adaptive social systems marks a big difference. It establishes how fast and efficiently a country can respond when there is a crisis. On the screen, you can now see the inverse relationship between the level of maturity of the system and the amount of time that the country will need to respond to an emergency. A conclusion of the analysis is the following: countries with social protection, adaptive social protection systems respond faster and in a more effective manner to a disaster. So investing in these systems brings results. This shows the capacity, the response capacity of countries. Acting fast when a shock takes place allows you to reduce losses among vulnerable and poor populations and guarantees better returns of your investment. These results can also be broken down by dimension, and this provides us a more accurate vision at a regional and national level. The greatest levels of progress are categorized into 3. Financing and governance. Countries have achieved great progress in terms of regulatory frameworks that position new roles and functions for adaptive social protection. In terms of management and infrastructure, Countries also show progress in the development of operational capabilities, the deployment of programs in the country, and the implementation of social registries. This is the result of more than 3 decades of sustained investment through monetary transfers that managed to establish capabilities that today can be used for disaster response and preparedness. However, in spite of all this, there's still a long way to go. We need to develop key pieces for adaptive social protection, such as improving institutional capabilities and coordination between institutions and civil protection, and better coordinate contingency financing systems with protection systems. In contrast, there are issues with coverage and with the adaptation of programs, as well as the capacity to transform information into useful inputs for the decision-making process. This is where we need to focus, where we need the greatest level of effort. On top of the score, the regional report includes numerous examples of best practices and experiences in countries that have managed to make a difference in their adaptive social protection actions. Some role models are the cases of the Dominican Republic and Brazil. They have an intensive use of data in the Dominican Republic to guide the decision-making process in disaster preparedness and response, focusing on the most vulnerable and poorest households. Brazil focuses on management and interinstitutional coordination, and they can do this thanks to sustained investment. During the discussion panel after this presentation, we will have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about both experiences. All this information is available in a public result dashboard where the users can actually explore each dimension and indicator by country and identify learning opportunities as well as opportunities to exchange experiences among countries. At the end of the event, we will show a video that explains more in detail how this dashboard works. On the chat, you will find a link to download the report, and I would like to invite you to use it in your respective countries. Moving forward, we identified 5 key challenges to strengthen, especially the ex-ante role played by adaptive social protection systems. First, to translate high-level policies in practical measures that would regulate the specific use of this type of system. Many countries have strengthened their legal framework. Now we need regulation processes and operational capabilities at a national level, but also at a local level. The second step is to expand coverage of regular social programs to strengthen the basis, the foundation of the system. Social and adaptive social protection are not 2 different paths. Investing in one means investing in the other, strengthening resilience. In addition, we need to create mechanisms to improve contingency financing and link this to the social protection system. Many countries have this type of financing, but these mechanisms are not connected to social protection programs and systems. Then we also need to clarify and specify the role of adaptive social protection, promoting the use of innovative technology that will improve and lead to a more efficient use of resources. We need more than cash transfers. These are central elements, but they are not the only ones in terms of adaptive social protection. In order to avoid human capital losses, we also need to strengthen the adaptation of social services, including care systems, in order to guarantee their functioning during an emergency. And finally, I would like to share a reflection that we shared at the beginning too. Responding to this type of challenge is not yet one more expenditure. It's a profitable investment for countries. In the recent study that we will soon publish, we saw that for every dollar investment in this, the return for countries is 1.5 or 1 $1.5 more or less, especially thanks to avoiding losses in capital, human capital and lives. And finally, the maturity model opens the way for the next steps towards strengthening adaptive social protection systems. First, based on these results, we will be able to move forward in terms of bridging gaps, using the diagnosis to guide decisions in priority areas and follow up on other progress. Second, we will be able to develop investment plans. They will allow us to strengthen sustainably the adaptive capacity of protection systems. And third, we will create a practice community to facilitate the exchange of knowledge and best practices among countries. This initiative will be promoted together with the World Food Programme. Together, these three pillars are trying to translate diagnosis into concrete actions, shared knowledge, shared learning, and ongoing improvements to the system. In this regard, the maturity model is not only a framework to evaluate systems, it's also a practical bridge between diagnosis and action, and between knowledge and strengthening of systems in order to better respond in the climate context that we have and to strengthen resilience. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex and Ginés. I understand that the fastest we act, the return will be greater. So each day matters. In terms of implementation, I would like to highlight a big part of the implementation of this model is that it's done together with the countries. So there's a dialogue with other countries, validation, and we take into account all the inputs that we receive from the countries where the model is implemented. And I would like to move on to the next part of this webinar to hear what countries have to say. We have two very important guests here. First, Rosilene Rocha, who's interim secretary of the National Secretary of Social Assistance of the Social Development Ministry in Brazil, and Augusto de los Santos, who is the director of the beneficiary single system. This panel will be moderated by Pablo Ibarran, Chief of the Social Protection and Market System, Labor Market System at the IDB. Some of the interventions will be in Portuguese, so I would kindly request all participants to choose their language of their preference. Thank you. Go ahead, Pablo. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, all the colleagues, for organizing this space to talk about the importance of having social protection systems that are capable to adapt themselves and even in a preemptive manner. Rosaline, thank you very much for connecting here today to talk about something so important here about your perspective and your experience in Brazil. I know that because of time constraints, we will begin with you, Rosaline. We would like to know, based on the findings in the report that Brazil is one of the most advanced countries, what are the strengths that you identified in terms of management, but also what are the gaps or challenges that you identified as the most relevant ones when building adaptive social protection systems in Brazil? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I thank ITB for this invitation. Thank you, Pablo. I'd also like to thank for this presentation of the report. It is so encouraging to see that such an assessment brings results to Brazil, positive results for Brazil and for our system of social protection in Brazil. But it also points to challenges that we've been facing in our everyday work. However, because of this very good presentation, this allows us to carry out more in-depth discussions, thus helping our work. With regard to your question, yes, Brazil does have a robust adaptive social protection. In other words, the interrelationship of protection systems and the necessary responses in emergency situations. In the Brazilian case, I think that the Brazilian adaptive social protection system that is very much based on our a single register, as it has been mentioned. Actually, it also is based on many other initiatives. For example, the Bolsa Família program, the continuous cash benefit program, and other such social programs that we have in fishing, in the fishing area, the farming area, minimum wage. In other words, a whole set of actions that actually bring this robustness and this capacity to our adaptive social protection system that will obviously reflect in good results in our responses. A very important difference in our Brazilian system is that we have a single system in social assistance, and this reports to all actions and responds to all actions with our civil defense. These are the two main sectors that will get to the emergency situation the first. And this is a system with great capillarity in Brazil. It is present in the whole country.
It works very swiftly, and it's a system known as fund-to-fund system. It's not bureaucratic at all. It works very fast, and that means that response reaches beneficiaries swiftly in terms of human resources and funding, specifically for situations of this nature. This is a regularly funded and automatically funded system, so it's co-funded by the central government for all of the municipalities and states in Brazil, 100% of them, and that helps with administrative systems and also the whole response system in terms of cash transfers, etc. So we have a federal government, and according to the agreement that we have, the form of government, we have a decentralized form of government that works, including all of the federation, the federal entities, the municipalities, and the states is very helpful, so that when there is a state of emergency, it helps, and also with our routine everyday work, things work smoothly thanks to this social protection system that is completely based on our federal form of government and all of the powers of the different levels of government. In terms of social assistance or social spending, which is this response that reaches beneficiaries swiftly in cases of emergency, we have a task force for mobilization of both funds and human resources, and that's done at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level for municipalities, towns, and also states that are facing states of emergency, and that happens very fast as well, both in terms of human resources and financial resources, as I said before. Since 2005 and to date, we've had 150 municipalities supported by the federal government, where this protection force that we call, that was not, and they were not in place under that name or that format, but they have been in place nonetheless, with a great deal of funding and technical support, etc. So basically, this organization that has yielded such a good score in the assessment that you mentioned. So we have a set of nationwide, state and also local policies that are interconnected, but especially in terms of social care, what we call civil defense, and it's basically three fronts on which we work in order to deal with emergency situations. But as I said, we were not able to get more than 71% because we still face several challenges, and I'd like to raise some of them here because this was said before. I think that there should be more interaction and cooperation between countries in the region. I think that would help us share information and experiences, and so that we can each, within our own context and uniqueness, deal with our issues, but we can share our own approaches. And in the case of more developed countries, such as that of the French Development Agency and other countries, they can help in terms of, Brazil's response to emergency situations or states of emergency. And one thing that we need is better structured financing. We do have ongoing and an effective funding on a yearly basis. However, emergency response needs to get a special, what we call a special credit for each situation. We're able to plan for swift responses, but when it comes to social assistance, we are not able, or social support, we're not able to do preventative work based on the information, the data that we have. I mean, we have a wealth of data, that there's no lack of that. We have a snapshot of each home, of each household in terms of infrastructure, access to sanitation. We know about income levels, schooling, both for parents and children in the household. So we do have a great, very much detailed snapshot of what the social and economic situation is. And we're also working on a more structural and environmental aspect. But we still have a challenge when it comes to social support. So prevention in general is a major daunting challenge for public policy. So we do have that enshrined in the law at all three levels of government that speak to the need to do preventative work in terms of risk. And that does not just refer to emergency situations, but also sexual abuse, violence against women. And of course, that's where we have a major challenge. I believe that we stand to gain a great deal if we were to have exchanges with countries where this aspect were to be worked on further, not just in terms of the fact that there are very high levels of inequality in some of our countries, and there's a need for swift action, but also in terms of indicators and methodology. We can help each other build more capacity, more of a methodology and techniques, learning from other jurisdictions that are have further developed it. And also when it comes to emergency situations, we find ourselves in a very serious situation. So we base what we do on objective needs, such as continuous cash transfers, the so-called Bolsa Familia, another cash transfer, accommodation at hotels and human resources. But there are other issues that are less tangible, such as the issue of trauma. People who were at home with their families, all of a sudden they find themselves at a hotel with strangers, surrounded by strangers, especially when it comes to children and teenagers. They were at home, they felt safe at home. All of a sudden they're in a hotel room, they have no room to play. And that's another issue that needs to be broached by this social support initiatives. Last Thursday and Friday, I visited one of the hardest hit cities in Brazil, in Minas Gerais, Juiz de Fora, where we had 67 people from our national healthcare system there, and we're talking about millions of reals that were invested. And I know that it was difficult for people who were at home to be moved to hotels, especially when they have children. And I also experienced that when I was the secretary of one of the municipalities in Brazil, where 3,000 people found themselves homeless overnight, and we had to deal with it. So the question is, what can we do to go beyond the more tangible aspects, the more material aspects of these emergency situations? And finally, I'd like to underscore the importance of data, and that's in the report and also in our own assessment for Brazil. These reports, such as the one that we just heard about from the IDB, can help inform decision-making ahead of time. And this is an urgent challenge. We need to work with georeferencing, and we need to train our human resources. It's a matter of solidarity also, but and people learn from experience, but training is far from easy. It's very challenging, even in terms of the mental health of workers. So we need to provide training, and we need support for that, and to be able to increase our resilience, our ability to respond, and for us to be ready, because based on the data, we are facing a major challenge. If we do not think in terms of a green economy, our protection strategy will have to be greater and greater to deal with things that, unfortunately, situations we do not want to find ourselves in. Thank you.
I believe that you're raising essential points. We were saying that social protection systems are complex, that they're complicated, and much more so when they're complete, such as the Brazilian system with the health system. And then all of that enables us to respond to emergencies. And you were mentioning amongst several issues, the issue of how the system is anchored, the social protection system is anchored in Brazil and plays an important role with the single registry. So I'd like to turn to Augusto. Augusto is the manager of SUBEN, the director of SUBEN, which is also that anchor that is being built. And the question that I'd like to address to Augusto, and also to hear your side of things, is how are you currently using the SUBEN data, which is the social registry in the country that has been widely recognized in the region, in order to strengthen the response when dealing with disasters in the Dominican Republic, and how SUBEN is not only used as a source of data, but how is this integrated into the governance in order to have a more timely response given to shocks? And also, once you answer this, how, just like Rosalind told us, what are the areas of opportunity, or where do you believe we have to focus future steps as a priority in order to beef up the adaptive social protection system in the Dominican Republic? Please go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Rosalind. Very interesting presentation and the elements that you mentioned, and I fully agree with that positioning and that need for a regional exchange and sharing our experiences in order to continue improving systems. Regarding the Dominican Republic, we've been involved in a transformation process of the social protection system that has adopted a comprehensive approach in order to respond to the new challenges posed by adaptive social protection. This has gone hand in hand with articulation, with active, preemptive in responding to this in the social protection system. Our experiences have gone hand in hand with the impact of the meteorological events, but we've had others, such as the case of the impact because of the explosion that we had in a province that was close to Santo Domingo, which is a capital city in the Dominican Republic. Another phenomenon that we witnessed when the border was closed and the means of life of the border population were also impacted. And recently, one of the most shocking moments a year ago, we had the collapse of the roof in a disco bar, and there was also a situation and a response given by the Dominican government that went beyond dealing with climate events. But just like what Rosilene was mentioning, we see the response in cases of hydrometeorological events. Also, yesterday, the alert changed. A green alert and a yellow alert in some territories changed to a red alert. And immediately what we do is to include the information that we have, placing it in the hands of institutions, prevention, disaster control, and disaster prevention institutions. As part of the information that we make available, we have the data that we receive, the vulnerability index that allows us to see the probability of a household to be impacted or to be affected by one event because of hydrometeorological event. But all those social informations that lie in our information systems collected through our social and economic situation and registries and households, as well as other instruments that we have, specifically instruments in order to collect information at times of obtaining information on special situations. And this information has been used by society concretely for prior information before we have a crisis, the intervention plan in the territories, and even to support government initiatives.
In fact, this indicator was developed in order to follow up the government management actions. Part of what the government is trying to do through these surveys to see those households that are resilient to climate change. It's also used through the National Emergency Operations Committee. It was key to have information as well as crossing the data that we received from the different institutions. But on top of this, we have other instruments developed by multilateral institutions as well as national agencies, such as the case of the COVE platform and Nacaona platform. Nacaona is a platform that has a lot of its information based on data that has been crossed with information by the different agencies that provide information about floods, so they can foresee or estimate the probability of a specific disaster in specific region. All this information is allowing us to have much interesting conversations and more in depth to identify, for example, areas where a specific meteorological event can happen with certain probability. When the event takes place, there is direct coordination between this rapid response team and our team. We're constantly exchanging information through different roundtables, meetings, and things that have to do with governance. Specifically, the information is received from defense agencies. They tell us where they're dealing with an incident. That information is standardized so that we can actually link it to the information systems that we use, so that we can identify what were the areas that were affected by the disaster, and then try to analyze and decide where the government should provide the social protection support. We respect all the different roles. That's the first stage. We have first responders at the time, then we have social assistance agencies that help take care of the environment, of the houses, the buildings, And they take care of everything that has to do with restoring the livelihoods of the people. They provide foods, medication, beds, and so on and so forth. And the third stage has to do with social protection, specifically with emergency bonds. This is an ongoing effort that is part of, because it's part only because there's a committee with many different stakeholders where we discuss these situations. And this is how decisions are made in an informed manner. In terms of governance, this is not an isolated matter. We need to integrate all the different elements in order to have good governance. We have an emergency form basically that is used by the committee to make decisions, and it includes information that we've received from the different agencies. So there's a technical group and an emergency committee, but then there are different groups too. Currently, there's a adaptive roundtable where we have different stakeholders included in there, and they're carrying out exchanges that have to do with social policies and so on and so forth. Within the same group, they develop manuals or response mechanisms to rapidly respond to an emergency. There's a national emergency response too that includes that emergency basic form, which is a tool that is used in order to determine the degree of the disaster, and that also helps coordinate the emergency or the different responses. It allows them to receive support from the government up to 6 months, and depending on how much the households have been affected and the budget that has been allocated, the number of deaths, whether it's partial damage, and so on and so forth. And we also participate directly in the exchange of this ecosystem of data. In terms of challenges we have, on the one hand, we need to coordinate more. We need to keep the coordination alive, especially this coordination has to focus on reducing the times to process information and then help or provide the assistance that is needed. In the event of an emergency, we waste a lot of time trying to adjust the information, and at the time of an emergency, time is of the matter, and we need to provide a response as soon as possible because many households won't have the means to get food or shelter, and so the fastest the government's response, the fastest we will be able to support the most vulnerable ones. So we need to improve the coordination system as well as the interoperability of the data. We are part of the National Roundtable on Interoperability. We have developed a regulation in the country. We have a single platform with other institutions, or we've seen some progress, but there is a lot of work to be done in that sense. And I think it's a great opportunity for institutions that I've mentioned to continue to work on this with a single vision, in moving in a single direction. Then it is the issue of technical capacity. Many times we cannot have a very fast response, and there could be some delays between the occurrence of the natural disaster and the response. Why? Because it depends on resources that are not always available. They're in a different item from where the social protection institutions are, so that delays the response. So we need to make sure that we make the response faster so we can address it. the needs of the most vulnerable. Augusto, very interesting. What you're mentioning is fascinating. It's clear that the role of an institution such as yours is key because you manage data and you have to be ready to provide a rapid response. It has to do also with, you talked about financing. It's important to have financing in place for the regular transfer system, but also to provide a response and to be ready to do so and invest in prevention, because many of what you're talking about has to do with the fact that we need the systems in place to act in a preemptive manner. And finally, another point that was mentioned is that we cannot forget the face and the human dimension of an emergency. We are working for those families that live in complex situations. They suffer a shock, and that puts them in an even more vulnerable situation. So civil protection, civil defense, mental health, all these services are truly important, and the coordination among them. So thank you very much for presenting the challenges in great detail, because that's what we like. So thank you very much for being here. Now I would like to offer the floor back to Luis to continue with this webinar. Thank you for taking part in it. Thank you very much. We promised not only a report, but also a tool. We are now moving on to some closing remarks, and afterwards we will show a video with all the functions for those that would like to explore. We will also share the link of the tool on the chat, so you can all stay to explore, and we will be here available if you have any questions. So to offer some closing remarks, I would like to invite Tatiana Carnero Alves, Chief of the Climate Change Solutions Division, to share some closing remarks. Tatiana, go ahead. Hello, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm going to offer my closing remarks in English. I could have done it in Portuguese too, but I chose English. Anyway.
I would like to share a reflection that I believe it's really central to the presentations we have had today. For many years, these issues were viewed mainly through environmental lenses. Today, we have been able to deepen our understanding of the adaptation agenda and showcase its main social dimension. So it was really great to listen to Rosilene on that, her final words. And this growing frequency and intensity of shocks are placing increasingly pressure in our institutions, our public policies, and most importantly, the daily lives of the millions of people of our region. And those who feel its impact most intensely remain those who are already live in situations of high vulnerability. In Latin America and the Caribbean, this is a development challenge, an equity challenge, and an institutional capacity challenge as well. Across the region, shocks interact with persistent poverty, inequality, informality, and gaps in access to the basic services, amplifying social and economic risks. As highlighted by the new IDB Group strategy, IDB Plus, challenges related to poverty, inequality, vulnerability, and a changing climate and environmental degradation are deeply interconnected and require integrated responses capable of delivering greater impact and scale. And this is precisely where adaptive social protection becomes critically important. Adaptive social protection allows us to combine two agendas that need to work much more closely together, as we have been seeing throughout the event today. The climate and the social agendas. It reminds us that adaptation is not only about responding more effectively to shock, but also about strengthening the capacity of public systems to protect those who are in most need, and at the right time and with the right instruments. Evidence from IDB indicates that timely and well-targeted social protection responses can significantly reduce the long-term welfare losses, especially for poor and vulnerable households. In this context, the adaptive social protection maturity model has enormous value. One of its main strengths is that it helps make these risks visible in a more systematic way. It creates awareness around the need to strengthen ex ante capacity and invites us to examine whether appropriate regulatory frameworks are in place, whether programs include complementary preparedness measures, and whether forward-looking risk scenarios and data are being used to better anticipate extreme events and build adequate capacities. For the work of the IDB's Climate Change Solutions Division, where I'm leading, this approach is particularly valuable. It strengthened countries' dialogue on the social and fiscal efficiency of integrating resilience consideration into social programs while supporting progress towards solutions that are both people-centered and better prepared for a more complex risk environment that we will be facing. Ultimately, this is what we're talking about, building systems that are better prepared, not only to respond to, but also, above all, better prepared to care for, to protect, and to leave no one behind, and in an increasingly challenging context, as we all know. Finally, I would like to thank the financial and technical support of the French Agency for Development, AFD, as they decided to collaborate with us in this very innovative agenda. With that, I would like to thank you very much for this event, for participating, for the invitation. Thank you very much, Luis, Paulo, and I hand over to you, Luis.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now Laura Rojas, the head of the Risk Management Unit, important cooperators in order to build this model and for the implementation of this agenda. Laura, please proceed. Thank you, Luis. I shall be very brief because Tatiana has already shared with us the importance of this agenda for us as a bank. And as you can see, we're working on this together among several departments. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who made this event possible, but not only this event, but this agenda, thanks to the IDB officials, our partners for the leadership, and the technical team that has done very strict work that support the maturity model, the report, and the interactive platform. We invite you all those who are participating in this webinar, we invite you to use it, to play with it, and to give us feedback on the use of the platform. This regional report leaves with us a very clear report, and it is that in Latin America and the Caribbean, to protect the people facing these shocks is part of a broader development approach. It is not simply a matter of dealing with shocks and having an environmental vision or disaster management approach. These are crises that disproportionately affect the most vulnerable households, and what they're doing is exacerbating these inequities that already exist. So we have set this agenda as an essential part of our action in the plan of action that we have on disaster risk management at the IDB as a central axis in what it entails and what it means to take care of events and emergencies. The maturity model and the platform that we're launching today is a common evidence that identifies the strengths, closes gaps, and guides our concrete actions at a country level. And we hope that it will prove to be useful for all the countries that are with us today. It is also part of an initiative that we have at the bank, which is preparing and working on resilience in the Americas, where we're working in order to provide a whole set of tools for the identification of risks and data based on risk, which will enable countries to make decisions, clear decisions, with clear information on preparedness and response before risks, which are increasingly more complex. So adaptive social protection for us is an essential pillar of this approach because it is connecting this information with financing systems, and above all, it is reaching the ultimate beneficiary, that is our populations in our region. Thank you very much to each and every one of you for your participation. We hope that the tools will be useful, and we also hope to continue working with you in order to strengthen the social protection system so that it will be more adaptive, more inclusive, and more resilient in the region. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the team for cooperating with us. Thank you very much to all our participants, and we will include in our chat the links to the tool, to the report, and we will close with this video that is going to illustrate how the tool works. So to all of you, thank you very much for having participated in this webinar, and let me show you the video. Economic crisis and those created by extreme climate events more frequently impact the households in Latin America and the Caribbean. And when faced with these challenges, social protection systems ought to be capable of responding and adapting. In order to be able to understand how prepared the region is, the Inter-American Development Bank created the Adaptive Social Protection Maturity Model, a tool that assesses the capacity of social protection systems to anticipate, respond to, and adapt to these shocks. In order to facilitate the analysis, the IDB developed this interactive dashboard, which allows users to analyze results, identify gaps, and pinpoint opportunities for improvement. At the top of the dashboard are the main navigation filters, where results can be filtered by region, sub-region, or by country. The dashboard also displays the regional average maturity level, both overall and by dimension, which allows us for comparison of results. This bar chart shows the distribution of maturity levels among countries, allowing you to identify progress and gaps in the region. On the left-hand side of the dashboard, you have the 60 indicators distributed across the 7 dimensions that make up the maturity model. Each dimension analyzes a fundamental component of adaptive social protection. In the average by indicator tab, there is a spider chart that's showing the maturity level by dimension and the scores obtained for each indicator. The dashboard includes a repository of national regulations that allows users to consult the legislation, resolutions, and strategies that support the various components of the system in each country. The Adaptive Social Protection Maturity Model and its interactive dashboard enable the transformation of data into knowledge for decision-making, while fostering the exchange of best practices and experiences among countries facing similar shocks. To learn more, visit our webpage. Thank you very much to each and every one of you, all those who participated, and I hope that this tool will prove to be useful. Have a wonderful rest of the day.